Okay, good day everyone. So our topic for today is about the history of life on Earth. So at the end of this module or lecture, you are expected to first describe the general features of the history of life on Earth, including generally accepted dates and sequence of geologic timescale characteristics of major groups of organisms present during these periods. So in this lesson po, we have yung what I know section. So you have to answer this pre-assessment, which talks about the history of life on Earth. So history of life on Earth. So let's explore the origin of life on Earth. You already know the Earth is still the only known planet with the existence of life, because Earth it is also known as the integrated system, or it is a planet, or it is a habitable planet, which it has the four subsystems, which include the geosphere, atmosphere, hydrosphere, and last is yung biosphere. The reason why kung bakit naging habitable yung Earth planet po natin is that it has the right distance from the sun. It is protected from harmful solar radiation by its magnetic field. And also, it is kept warm by an insulating atmosphere, and it has the right chemical components for life, which is meron siyang water and carbon. So this means that the Earth can provide the necessary ingredients and conditions for life to exist. But is this how simple the equation is? Or favorable life condition is equal to existence of life? Would be the answer is yes or no. So yes, number one is yes, because life exists on Earth because of the favorable condition that it has. And no, because it is not as simple as that equality. So explore natin what they mean by life. So life is complex because life is a genius. Yes, you have it right. You have read it right. Life has its ingenuity. So what do you mean by ingenuity na yan? Being clever, being original, inventive, or kakaiba. So life thrives not only on favorable conditions, but also it adapts and challenges itself to fit in its environment. Having mentioned the environment, let us now try to answer the question. So what is that question? Where did life begin? Saan ba nagsimula ang buhay? So let us consider the condition of primordial or young Earth. It is not the same as its structure today. Iba yung structure ng Earth po natin noon until now. Madaming mga changes, development. There are still no plants, trees, and breathtaking sceneries noon. So, there are only an atmosphere and places for water and ground. Yan lang yung meron tayo noon. The condition is still too harsh. Too harsh pa noon because the Earth is only starting. Nag-start pa lang yung development, lalo na sa land masses and the structure of our Earth. But the scientists were sure that at the beginning of life on Earth, there are atmospheric events. Meron ng mga atmospheric events taking place such as storms and thunders. So this is because of the chemical reactions occurring between the surface, atmosphere, and inner part of the very active young Earth natin. Because of these given conditions po, scientists narrowed down into three. Mayroon po tayong tatlong probable places where life first appeared on Earth. So meron pong tatlo, which are land, second is shallow pond, third is deep sea vents. So let us check each one of them and eliminate the two less likely place of origin of life on Earth. So try natin analyze kung ano yung three probable places where life first appeared on Earth. First po is yung land. The land is very unlikely. Unlikely because during young Earth time, there is still not enough oxygen. Wala pang enough oxygen on its surface. And of course, yung ultraviolet rays po natin are too strong. Too strong for molecular bonding that occur and make life possible. And number 2 is a shallow pond is a bit likely because it is full of organic materials and when evaporated. The organic materials present in it will have a higher concentration that will lead to more favorable conditions for organic materials to combine and make life possible. But, there's a but there, the experiments cannot prove it. So, hindi niya kayang patunayan yung statement in number 2. So, number 3 is, we are now left with deep sea vents. Ano naman tong deep sea vents na to? Are highly likely the exact place of origin of life on Earth. Because, why? DNA evidence suggests that early life forms can survive on high temperature conditions like those in deep sea vents. The high temperature also nagpo-provide siya ng high chemical energy, which makes deep sea vents the most accepted hypothesis among the 3 given places above. So, among those 3 probable places where life first appear on Earth, we consider po yung pangatlo, yung deep sea vents. So, ano ba yung sinasabi dito sa deep sea vents and the Miller-Urey experiment? Dito kasi, in deep sea vents, it is likely proven in theory. And DNA evidence correlation that deep sea vent is where life began. But can scientists prove it through experiment? Kaya ba nilang i-prove yung sinasabi nila doon sa deep sea vents through experimentation? The answer would be yes. Because Miller and Urey are scientists who conducted a simple experiment that yielded very helpful findings in answering questions about how life began on Earth. So dito, pinatunayan at nag-experiment sina Miller and Urey about the deep sea vents to clarify things, to answer the answers kung paano nagsimula yung life on Earth. So let's take this illustration about the Miller-Urey experiment. So it is stated in here, Stanley L. Muller and Harold C. Urey performed an experiment to describe the origin of life on Earth. So they were of the idea that the early Earth's atmosphere was able to produce amino acids. So ano ba yung tinutukoy dito na amino acids? Amino acids can deal with the organic compound that combined to form protein, wherein that amino acids together with proteins are the building blocks of life, wherein that producing amino acids from inorganic matter. So, ano yung inorganic matter na yan? Inorganic matter is derived or it is not derived from living organisms and contains no organically produced carbon. So, yan po yung inorganic matter. Wherein, those two biologists made use of methane. Ginamit nila po yung methane, water, H2O, hydrogen, and ammonia, which they consider were found in the early Earth's atmosphere, wherein the chemicals were sealed inside acier glass tubes and flasks connected together in a loop and circulated inside the apparatus. So the process that one flask is half filled. Dito, half filled po yung isang one flask with water and the other flask contains a pair of electrodes. Dito naman sa taas, contains pair of electrodes. The water was heated. Dito, it is heated, and then the vapor released was added to the chemical mixture. So, mamimix na po yung mga vapor dito. in the mixture. So the released gases circulated around the apparatus imitating the Earth's atmosphere. So yung mga gases na nag-evaporate will be it will consider or it will act as the atmosphere or Earth's atmosphere. The water in the flask represents the water itself. So yung mga water nandito sa experiment ni Urey and Miller will be the Earth's surface. The water on the Earth's surface and the water vapor is just like the water evaporating from the lakes and the seas. And next is the electrodes were used to spark the fire to imitate lightning and storm through water vapor. So yung mga electrodes dito, the discharge sparks lightning simulation will be the parang katulad doon sa imitation ng lightning and storm through water vapor. So the water vapors were cooled and the water condensed. So magko-cool po yung water or yung vapor po natin, and then the water will condense. And this condensed water trickles. What do you mean by trickles? It is the small flow of liquid back into the first water flask in a continuous cycle. So mag-uulit lang yung process na to because it is a continuous cycle experiment. So Miller and Urey examined the cold water after a week, and they observed that 10 to 15% of the carbon was in the form of organic compounds. 2% of carbon had formed 13 amino acids. Yet, meron pong yet doon, Miller and Urey experiments were condemned, yung term doon, condemned by their fellow scientists. So what do you mean by condemned? It was questioned. They need more explanation. It was questioned yung experiment ni Miller and Urey. So the criticism of the Miller-Urey experiments that the experiment failed to explain how proteins were responsible for the formation of amino acids. A few scientists have contradicted that the gases used, yung ginamit nila Miller and Urey, are not as abundant as shown in the element or experiment. So parang kulang yung ginamit nila. They were of the notion that the gases released by the volcanic eruptions such as oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide make up the atmosphere. So sinasabi nila na yung volcanic eruption na binubuga ng volcanic eruption natin such as oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide, yun po yung binuo ng isang atmosphere. Therefore, the results are not reliable. So madaming mga questions. They condemned the experiment of Miller and Urey. But this is ito yung isa sa mga accepted or hypothesis or theory that we acknowledged. Yung last, yung deep sea vents by Miller-Urey experiment. So next po is, when did life begin? Paano ba nagsimula ang life? So let's have this one, origins of life. So scientists debate a range of ideas about how life on Earth began. Paano ba nagsimula yung buhay dito sa Earth natin? The most widely accepted scenarios involved the geochemistry of the planet's surface. So in the early universe, vast molecular clouds of dust and gas condensed to form protostar surrounded by a protoplanetary disk, wherein that tiny dust grains consisting of silicate minerals coated with ice stuck together and assembled into larger particles. So the Earth was formed because it was not too hot and not too cold, not too dry and not too wet. Liquid water existed on the surface. So the first land was probably volcanic forming island arcs in a vast ocean. So ponds or lakes in volcanic regions were likely environments for jump-starting of life. So parang doon nagsimula yung jump-starting life. So the early atmosphere had no oxygen. Take note of that. The early atmosphere had no oxygen. It consisted mainly of nitrogen and carbon dioxide with smaller amounts of hydrogen, water, and methane. So lightning, asteroids impacts, and ultraviolet light from the sun acted on the atmosphere to generate hydrogen cyanide, a compound of hydrogen, carbon, and nitrogen. So dito din, raining into volcanic or craters lakes, the cyanide reacted with iron brought up by water circulating through rocks. So makikita natin yung cyanide dito and yung mga iron. So the resulting iron cyanide compounds accumulated over time, building up into a concentrated stew of reactive chemicals. So life as we know, it requires DNA or RNA. Some scientists believe that RNA emerged directly from these reactive chemicals. So naniniwala yung mga scientists po natin dito na dito daw nagbunga yung mga RNA po natin that nudge along by dynamic forces in the environment. So nucleotides, the building blocks of RNA, take note of that, eventually formed, then joined together to make strands of RNA. And as you can see in this simple illustration, some stages in this process are still not well understood. So UV light drove the conversion of cyanide into a simple sugar. Ito yung UV light natin that converted into simple sugar, wherein phosphates catalyze chemical reactions between these sugars and cyanide derivatives. So yung mga sugar and cyanide natin, it will be the derivatives in our phosphate catalysts. So in the presence of UV light and phosphate, RNA nucleotides were formed. So once RNA was made, some strands of it became enclosed. So meron na siyang mabuong enclosed within tiny vesicles formed by the spontaneous assembly of fatty acids na nakilala din as lipids or lipids into membranes, creating the first protozoans. So as the membranes incorporated more fatty acids, they grew and divided. And at the same time, internal chemical reactions drove replication of the encapsulated RNA. So yun po yung a brief origins of life. So moving on, paano ba nagsimula yung life? Pieces of evidence suggested that if Earth is 4.5 billion years old from radiometric dating of all this rock found on it, should be the life on Earth began most probably 3.5 billion years ago. So the first line of evidence that gives us the answer to the question, when did life begin on Earth, is the stromatolites. So meron po tayong stromatolites dito. What do you mean by stromatolites? They are the living rock samples that scientists have discovered and dated to age up to 3.5 billion years old. These are rock formations identical to a living mat of microbes. They have layers of microbes and sediments, and scientists found out that the topmost layer uses photosynthesis to obtain food, and lower layer uses the top layer's byproduct to survive. So another line of threads of evidence is the microfossils found in Western Australia. These are the fossils that were first thought to be minerals, but later studies using advanced techniques of dating and investigation proved that these are fossils of microbes who have lived 3.5 billion years ago. Moving back sa stromatolites po tayo, more on stromatolites. So stromatolite deposits are formed by, pinoform po ito ng mga sediment trapping and binding and or by precipitation activities of the microbial communities according to Aramic 1976. So those microbes are active on the surface layer of the stromatolites while the underlying buildup is litified. So dito lang po underlying buildup is yung litified remnant of former microbial surface communities that could be interpreted as a trace fossil. So these deposits po built up very slowly. A single or 1 meter structure may be 2,000 to 3,000 years old, but the tiny microbes that make up modern stromatolites are similar to organisms that existed. Parehas lang noong mga organisms na nag-exist noong 3.5 billion years ago. So what's more about stromatolites are the reason, sila yung reason kung bakit why we are alive today. So before cyanobacteria, the air was only 1%. So meron lang po tayong 1% of oxygen on before cyanobacteria. Then for 2 billion years, our photosynthesizing stromatolites pumped oxygen into the oceans. So we are thankful that stromatolites pump oxygen sa oceans po natin, like po sa underwater trees before trees existed. When the ocean's waters were saturated, oxygen was released into the oxygen or into the air, and with around 20% of oxygen in the air. So life was able to flourish and then evolve. And even today po, you can see stromatolites fizzing underwater na nagre-release pa rin sila ng mga oxygen. So saan ba matatagpuan? Saan ba tumitira yung stromatolites po natin? So living stromatolites are no longer widely distributed. So kakaunti na lang po yung stromatolites po natin. And there are only 2 well-developed marine stromatolite areas in the world. So dalawa na lang, which are yung Bahamas at yung Hamelin Pool in the Shark Bay area of Western Australia. So, kakaunti na lang yung living stromatolites po natin, which is they are no longer widely distributed. So, Hamelin Pool is home to the most extensive living stromatolite system in the world. Take note of that. The organisms thrive in the area's hypersaline water, which is twice as salty as normal sea water. And in Australia's marine stromatolites are protected. So, pinoprotektahan po nila yung stromatolites po natin na nandoon sa Australia's marine. So, they are part of the Hamelin Pool Marine Nature Reserve, which lies within the UNESCO World Heritage listed Shark Bay. So, the Jason Hamelin Station Reserve is now owned by Bush Heritage Australia. So, yung Hamelin Station Reserve po natin is pag-aari na po ng Bush Heritage Australia, wherein they are protecting it. Kasi it lies within the UNESCO World Heritage na nakalista na po sa Shark Bay po natin. So, yan po yung isa kung bakit, when did life began. And second one is yung panspermia. So, what do you mean by panspermia? This is the other side of the coin. What do you mean by other side of the coin? Sa ibang bahagi ng katawan or ibang bahagi ng mundo. So, we have learned that the life had first appeared as simple microbes and bacteria. So, alam natin na yung buhay or yung life started with a simple microbes and bacteria, but which have their point of origin from the chemical reactions and building of organic compounds on deep sea vents of ancient Earth. So, which as evidence suggests occurred from 3.5 billion years ago. But there is another school, may mga school po thought as to how living organisms started. At mayroon silang mga knowledge na iba sa atin or may mga speculation sila kung paano or when did life begin. So, sabi dito, panspermia is a theory po siya, theory that postulates that life had come from outside. Take note, that outside of the earth, and upon reaching a suitable environment such as the deep sea vents could have evolved into a more complex living organism such as bacteria. So, meaning to say, panspermia, ito yung theory po na sinasabi nila na yung mga organisms or yung life daw is nanggaling sa ibang lugar, ibang speculation na kung saan they reached the suitable environment na sinasabi nating deep sea vents, na doon sila nag-evolve into a more complex living organisms na tinatawag na nating bacteria. And supporting evidence to this theory, may evidence din sila dito, are the facts that organic molecules are found on rocks from other celestial bodies such as sa Mars po natin. And some bacteria can withstand a huge amount of radiation and also be able to stay dormant under low atmospheric conditions, which suggests that they may exist. So, pwede silang ma-exist anywhere in the universe, but we're not able to evolve because of the unfavorable condition. So, in short, panspermia, ito yung sinasabi nila na yung buhay daw ay nanggaling sa ibang lugar, which is nag-evolve lang yung mga organisms na yan. So, that's the panspermia. And that's it, our discussion. So, the tasks given in this one is that the task given, ilalagay nyo po siya sa Word document. Pwede nyo pong i-send through Messenger or email. So, the date submission will be on February 15, 2021. No more extension. So, read and explain the book of the origin. So, babasahin nyo po yan. Compare and contrast kung ano yung absolute dating and relative dating. Ano ba yung sinasabi nila dyan. And last task is summarize the idea behind geological time scale and create, gagawa po kayo ng simple concept map of geological time scale. So, okay, that's it for today. And I hope you understand my explanation about our topic, history of life on Earth. Okay, goodbye.